so we don't have this inspector system on a national level. And it's entirely publicly funded. The system, briefly, we have 9-year comprehensive education, which started in 1970. We had the dual system before that. I went to school in 63, and at the age of 10, I was sort of had a test, and then based on the results, I was sort of taken to another path. So we got rid of this system in 1970, and now we do have this 9-year comprehensive system. And after that, we have 3-year program, general upper secondary education, and 3-year programs in vocational upper secondary education, 8 main branches. But students can also include modules on their program from the both branches, or they can also have a combined degree, and it takes sometimes a 4th additional year. But the focus is to have an individual learning path, and about 95% of the age cohort, which is 60,000 students, they continue on secondary level education. 2 or 3% of them annually take this, on the left you have number 10, it means a second chance opportunity, 1,100 hours to think about your future. The only core component is guidance. How do you improve your credits, or you can go tasting different courses in the secondary level, or you can have apprenticeship, and then based on that get full credit if you get approved to those programs in the future. But it's 2 or 3% that use this opportunity. And then after the secondary level education, they are eligible applicants for higher education from both directions. This was changed 10 years ago, so it doesn't matter which path you take, you are eligible applicant. And at the moment, during the last 2 years, a small majority of the students have chosen the vocational path as their priority. And this shift has been taking place during the last 2 years. And after that, they have opportunities to go to universities of applied sciences, which basically have the bachelor degree. It was developed in the 90s. Or you can have a bachelor degree at the universities and then master degree in both higher education institutes. Currently, there's a debate to what extent there can be free movement on the master degree, but that's a debate that we don't have a clear answer yet. But at the moment, roughly 60% of the age cohort are aiming to the higher education, and 80% have at least the 3-year secondary level education. So the transition is quite active. In some branches in the vocational schools, we have some problems with dropout, but those are quite low compared to other European countries. And now, how is guidance embedded in this system? So I described that first. In 1970, when guidance was first time integrated into the educational system, it was due to the reform in educational system. Finland was at that time an agricultural society. It was moving to an industrial society. So one reason behind this educational reform was to improve the labor force, or the skills of labor force of Finnish citizens. And that's why the employer organizations were very interested in this reform. And they were very keen also to integrate guidance into the system, because that was one way they could introduce the opportunities in the labor market for students who mainly came from agricultural background at that time. So that was one strong key message, that guidance was a key factor in implementing the previous reform. And that's why career education was integrated into a curricula as a compulsory subject of students. There was a time slot for students for career education. And it was supported and implemented with the help of trained full-time school counselors. So at that time, Finland also trained the first school counselors to support the implementation of this curriculum. But it has turned out as well that the training of the counsellors was helping to implement the whole educational reform. They were like change agent, telling about it to students, to parents, other teachers as well. So that's one reason that why some of the first counsellors became principals in 10 years. So they knew the system and they were able to interpret the system. So they became expert on the system and linked to the labour market. The same happened in the 80s on the secondary level education. We also had a reform in vocational schools and also in the general education. The students had now opportunities for individual learning paths. So instead of providing training in groups, students had individual learning paths, and they could customize their programs based on some compulsory component and optional choices. So there was a huge demand for guidance, and in order to support this implementation, again, government allocated funding for counsellor trainers and full-time counsellors in secondary level setting as well. In the 90s, there was an even more stronger focus on individual programs, also in higher education. And at that time, we had shifted from centralized administration to regional administration. We have a national core curriculum, local adaptations, and more cooperation between secondary level institutes. And at that time, there were cuts in educational budget, so there were increased demand for guidance services. So in some municipalities there were cuts in guidance, but in some municipalities they realized that careers information and guidance, they are very cost-effective investments during the comprehensive education to provide the skills that the students need when they navigate in the future system. And at that time we had this decentralized administration, but the time allocation in the student timetable was kept, and also the legislation about full-time counsellors. So we do have student counselling still within the public educational system, and also the information, guidance and counselling run by the Public Labour Administration, and they are complementing the school-based services, although they are focusing on adults. And this is a graph of different providers. So we have the educational system and Ministry of Employment and the Economy, and then the Centre for International Mobility, which is the Euro Guidance Centre in Finland, but I skipped this slide. Now some facts. I think one of the basic added value is that guidance is a student entitlement in legislation. The Act for Comprehensive and Upper Secondary and Vocational Educational highlight that pupils and students are entitled to have educational and vocational guidance during every working day at school. So this they are entitled for. And in more details, decrees for comprehensive education, upper secondary and vocational education identify that student counsellors who are full-time trained practitioners and their qualification is defined in legislation, they take care of vocational and educational guidance, they have cooperation with the working life, and they have also possibilities to have work experience, and they are supporting the work experience of students. And guidance and counselings are provided in classrooms with the whole group at the same time, small group guidance plus personal individual guidance, and minimum 2 weeks as a work placement before they are age of 16. So it's an opportunity to have experience and explore the different opportunities which exist in labour market. And it's included within the curriculum, grade 1 to 6, it's embedded, and the goal is to promote the social skills, identifying learning skills, identifying potentially learning difficulties, but also discussions with parents about the implications of different languages or different optional parts. But in the grades 7 to 9, students have altogether about 90 hours time for careers education. And I think this is a very cost-effective way of having the whole age cohort available at the same time, or discussing the topic at the same time. In upper secondary general education, there's one 38-hour compulsory